All right, now, good morning. My name is Marin Turner, and I'm the State Director for AARP Kansas. Welcome to our special Facebook Live edition. Today, we have with us Dr. Marci Nielsen, who is an expert on public health, and she's also the Chief COVID Advisor for Governor Kelly. So, good morning, Dr. Nielsen.
So nice to see you, Marin. Thank you for having me.
So, we know that there's a lot going on with the COVID vaccine, and could you just tell us a little bit about what's going on, though, in Kansas?
Things in Kansas are rolling along quite nicely. We've got about 78% of individuals over the age of 65 who are vaccinated. And I think you are well aware that is the group that is most likely to become ill and die from COVID. So that is a really important statistic. We are making great headway at getting shots into arms. And overall, Kansas is doing quite well at preventing the spread of the virus. But you probably have heard Governor Kelly asking everyone to continue to wear their masks and to socially distance and encourage people to get vaccinated, because as we look across the United States, we do see evidence of a fourth wave. And so it's more important than ever that we hang on and keep doing all those right behaviors to stop this virus.
Yeah, we've been hearing about the possibility of another wave and that it could perhaps be even worse than what we had before. But in any case, we don't want any more waves. We want people to be safe and to do whatever they have to do to make sure that not only they are safe, but their family and the people they come in contact with. So now, there have been some questions out there about whether or not any of these vaccines are really safe and whether or not they can really do the job that they're designed to do. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we have seen some great studies coming out just this week that point to that very question, Marin, particularly around whether the vaccine works. I think folks hear the term vaccine efficacy and vaccine effectiveness and don't entirely know what that means.
Right.
Vaccine efficacy is really the number that points to the clinical trial. And when they test a vaccine, they test thousands of people to figure out whether or not the vaccine works. So all of the vaccines have all three that are on the market today have pretty high vaccine efficacy. But what we're most interested in is knowing whether or not the vaccine works in the real world, as our teenagers like to say. And just this week, we saw a large study look at that very question, looking at both the Pfizer and the Moderna. And these were looking particularly at people who worked on the front lines. So firefighters and healthcare workers and police officers. And what we found was overwhelming evidence that the vaccine, in fact, stopped people from getting COVID. So great news on that front. We also saw this week that the Pfizer vaccine was tested in kids ages 12 through 16. Okay. And the efficacy for that clinical trial was 100%. So this is such important research and such important and good news for us that the vaccines work.
Well, good. We've heard some questions about whether or not a person should wait for a particular vaccine because maybe one is better than the other. You have any comments on that? Should a person wait for, say, one versus another?
We in the public health community tell folks that the best vaccine to get is the one that's available to you now. Okay. And we've been saying that because, of course, there has been a supply problem. We haven't had enough vaccine. Now, as the supply is starting to increase, there may be, for one reason or another, a preference that people have to get one vaccine versus another. And if that's available to them, We certainly support their individual choice, but all three work very well, and all three are very safe. And so as soon as people can get signed up, speed is actually really important here, because we want to beat the mutations of the virus, what we sometimes hear called variants. Those variants, you'll hear the UK variant or the Brazil variant.
Yes, yes.
Those variants of the virus spread more quickly. So if we can get folks vaccinated before those variants spread, that's really how we're going to stop the virus. And that's the reason why public health folks say, get the virus that's available to you.
Okay, okay. So now, if you're just now joining us for Facebook Live, I'm Marin Turner, the State Director for AARP Kansas. And we have with us today Dr. Marci Nielsen, who is the Chief COVID Advisor for Governor Kelly. So now we know that Kansas has moved into phase 5, but can you just talk a little bit more about who can get that vaccine?
Yeah, right now the vaccine is available for any adult in Kansas over the age of 16 who is interested in being vaccinated. Now, the Pfizer vaccine, you can right now, the emergency use authorization, as it's called, the green light from the government, is for anyone over the age of 16. For Moderna, it's over the age of 18. But essentially, all adults in Kansas are eligible. We are seeing that it's easier to get on a vaccine list in some counties than in others. So we know, for example, if you live in Douglas County, there's still a bit of a waiting line. So, and we hear that in Shawnee County, for example, that it's easier to get a slot. So, of course, if you're a Kansan, you live or work in Kansas, you can go wherever you can get signed up. And if you go to vaccinefinder.org, you'll be able to take a look at all of the places that have vaccine close to you, find one, and maybe it involves a bit of a drive. But as I mentioned, trying to get vaccinated as quickly as possible is really pretty important.
So we know that at least in some counties, you no longer have to fill out the interest form. You can just schedule an appointment. And in some places, if you're over the age of 65, you can just walk in.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's good.
We've turned that corner. And as I think we talked a little bit last time, before the problem we had in Kansas and across the country was we had a shortage of vaccine. And so it was hard to find it, and it was frustrating for people who desperately wanted it. We're quickly going to be turning to a point in which we have enough vaccine, but we have people who are nervous about getting the vaccine. They're hesitating. And that group of folks, somewhere in the neighborhood of 30% of the population, those folks are really important for us to talk to. And not just us, we in the public health community, but you, Marin, talking to people that you know and love. There are two really important ways to address vaccine hesitancy. One is when you know someone who has personally received the vaccine and they can tell you about their experience. That really mitigates people's concern and helps them overcome whatever their fears might be. And the second way, and this is really important, is for people who have particular questions about the vaccine that are clinical in nature. Talking to your own doctor is so critically important. People will then understand, for my particular circumstances, do I have anything to worry about? And listening to their own doctor's advice is really important in addressing people's concerns.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, there are people who are, they may have some concerns, or they may be trying to find out more information. So, what can people do if they don't have access to the internet, or they have some concerns about going online because they're concerned about safety? What can people do?
Yeah, and there are plenty of folks in Kansas that don't have access to the internet. We see a lot of information being shared now publicly. So you sharing this information today is important, but the news is doing a terrific job of trying to keep people informed about what's happening. But again, I would send people back to their own primary care physician. And or to their local health department. You can make a phone call. You can make an appointment. Talking to somebody who is trusted is really key.
Mm-hmm.
We are starting an effort here in Kansas, and we know President Biden and Vice President Harris are doing the same in Washington, where they are getting a commissioned corps of leaders in the community to go out and talk to folks that they know, their friends, their family, their neighbors, about their own experience with the vaccine. So talking to your faith leaders, talking maybe even to your employer. Increasingly, we see employers who are working to become providers so that they can offer the vaccine to the people who work for them.
Oh, that's just fabulous. But as you talk about, talking to your faith leaders or people that you trust, or people in your family, are there some other things though that say groups like AARP can do to help get people signed up to get the vaccine?
Yeah, it's going to be increasingly important for groups like AARP to go into communities where we know there's some reluctance to vaccination, or we know there are some barriers to accessing healthcare. What the folks in public health call this are communities with a high social vulnerability index, so SVI. It looks at a number of different factors that point us to communities who are vulnerable. And what we're doing in Kansas is we're working with local public health departments, but also with community leaders to go into those counties that are the highest risk, and to work with community leaders to get the word out. In many cases, we need to translate the information into people's native language. So I think the role of AARP is going to be important in that regard. You have been so helpful as part of the COVAC initiative, which provided recommendations to the state regarding who should fit into which phase from a priority perspective. We'll be pulling that group back together, plus a wider group of faith leaders, healthcare providers, and we'll be pulling those folks together 2 weeks from now to talk about just the question you've asked, which is, what's the best way to reach those communities that maybe are still a bit reluctant to get vaccinated, or are having a hard time finding the vaccine?
Yeah, that's just wonderful. We are definitely committed to making sure people have the information they need so they can make an informed choice. And so that's excellent. We've really enjoyed making a contribution to the state. Do you? And maybe this is not a question that anyone can answer, but when do you think we're going to get back to normal, and what is normal going to look like?
Yeah, it's a great question, and lots of folks have lots of different opinions on that. It will be a new normal. I don't think our world will quite go back to the way that it was. And in some ways, that may be very good. We have learned a lot about what works in our healthcare system and what doesn't, unfortunately. In addition to seeing the equity gaps in terms of the people most at risk for this virus, we know folks in race and ethnic minority groups are not only more apt to get the virus, but they're more apt to die from the virus. So this issue of health disparities has really been brought to light, and we hope that we can bring more focus to that issue writ large. I think another issue that hopefully this pandemic will help shine a light on is our broken mental health system, and the fact that so many of us have been socially isolated and suffering from anxiety and depression.
Yes.
And it is very hard to find a provider. There's a shortage of mental health providers. And there's been a lot of stigma in this country about going to get help. So recognizing that we all have issues that we need to deal with, and we need to not only help one another as family and friends, but we need a better healthcare system to serve us. So when we get back to normal, we hope those things are better. We are still learning a lot about what this virus and this vaccine is going to be able to do for us from a transmissibility standpoint. We know, for example, we are told to get a yearly flu shot. We don't know if the COVID virus is going to require a yearly vaccine, but it's possible. We don't know if the variants that are spreading so quickly, as I talked about, will mean that we need to continue to wear our masks, certainly in those places where we're at high risk for potentially being exposed. And so those questions only science will answer. You know, this is such a new world we're living in. But the goal with vaccination is really to get us back to as normal a world as possible. And I think you can see that Governor Kelly she has taken an approach that is all in, right? What are the various things that we can do in Kansas to be safe? What are the various things we can do in Kansas to get the economy reopened? I mean, part of the reason the governor prioritized teachers for being really first in line to get vaccines in phase 2 was that we need to get schools reopened. That's so important for kids' mental health. It's important for parents to get back to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good information for people to keep in mind. You know, whatever the new normal is, you know, we'll have to make adjustments, but we want to get to it as soon as possible. We do have a question in the chat box about, you know, if people are fully vaccinated, then why do they have to wear a mask?
Yeah, the reason is there's still too many unknowns. We're not certain. We believe it is the case, but we are not certain whether the vaccines prevent asymptomatic spread of the disease. In other words, one very interesting and frightening thing about this virus is there are people who have it, but who have no symptoms. And so the clinical trials that tested the vaccine looked at transmissibility in symptomatic people. So we want to keep masking because we want to make sure that we can't spread the disease from that perspective. We want to keep masking because these variants that are spreading so quickly, we are pretty optimistic that the current vaccines prevent the spread of those variants. But it may be that the virus evolves more quickly than the vaccine. And so we need to keep masking until we're certain that we're ahead of that. And we need to keep masking because even if you're vaccinated and you know that you are protected from the disease, we know that people in our community aren't vaccinated. And in that off chance that we could still be a carrier and potentially infectious, we want to make sure that until everyone's vaccinated, until we reach that herd immunity level. It's going to be really important for consideration the health of our community to keep masking.
Okay, I think that makes sense. You know, we're coming up on a very important holiday over the weekend with lots of people celebrating Easter and, you know, getting together with family and fellow parishioners. Do you have any tips on how people can stay safe?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that people feel very strongly about. When we look at what happened over Christmas, and when we look at other times in which people have come together with their faith communities, we have seen increases in super spreading events, because when you're at church with someone, you're singing, you're close together, you're talking. Those are opportunities for the virus to spread quickly. So the first thing I would say is, make sure that you are following all the health behaviors that are recommended. So if you're getting together at church, you're wearing your mask, you're staying socially distanced to the full extent possible, you're trying to stay outdoors. All of those things continue to remain important because we don't have the whole population vaccinated yet. And you wouldn't want to make your fellow congregants, you wouldn't want to put them at risk.
Right. Okay. Well, this has all been very good information. And of course, we have this ongoing conversation, and we'll have you back for multiple occasions so that we can get information out to people. Again, AARP's goal is to make sure people have the information they need so that they can protect themselves and their families and make an informed decision. So until we talk again next time, how can people reach your office, or where should they go if they want some information from the state?
That is such a great question, because we have so much information that is available on the Kansas Department of Health and Environment's website. Okay. I know you've got a bunch of information available as well, Maren. It's interesting. I saw a study this morning about folks who are exposed to a lot of misinformation, mm-hmm. and are either misinformed or have questions. Those are the folks that are tending now to not get vaccinated. So AARP encouraging people to educate themselves is one of the very most important things that we can do. On the KDHE website, there is a plethora of information about vaccine safety, and there is a very long list of FAQs, so frequently asked questions. We add to that list literally every week. Every question that comes into the state that we're hearing repeated, we are adding that to our FAQ. And so folks really should spend some time on our website if they have questions. There is a hotline that I will get to you. I should remember it. It's even a mnemonic, and I'm having a blank mind here.
We're scrolling information at the bottom of the screen that people can use if they want to contact your office. There's a 800 number, 866-534-3463. And of course, you can check our website. We have lots of information, www.aarp.org/KS. So with that, thank you again, Marci. This has been wonderful. You've provided a lot of good information, and people know how they can contact the state now to get further information, as well as AARP. And we really look forward to the ongoing collaboration, and we'll look forward to having you back again very soon. So thank you. And thank you, everyone, for you're more than welcome. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into our Facebook Live today. Thank you. Bye-bye.